Dhaka Tribune, 19th of September 2023, China's occupation of Nepal caused problems for India's Communist Party. China established and provided funding and weapons to the Nepalese Communist Party to topple the democratic government and establish a communist dictatorship in Nepal. The dynamic India-China Great Game in South Asia is about to witness another power play. On September 22, Nepal's Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal is expected to visit China at the invitation of Chinese Premier Li Qiang, who replaced President Xi Jinping during the just-completed G20 conference in New Delhi. Dahal, elected premier for the third time in December 2022, will visit Beijing, Chongqing, and Hangzhou before taking the Tibet Autonomous Region back to Kathmandu. A plethora of offers and carpet bilateral bonhomie is in store. These include cross-border transmission lines, agribusiness, and edu-tech. Nearly 1,400 kilometers separate Nepal and Tibet, and there are north-south routes connecting TAR and Nepal, including a tunnel north of Kathmandu that will make it easier to reach the Resuwagadhi-Kerung border point with China, which is anticipated to be developed into a significant hub for trade and transit. This trip will mark Dahal's second significant journey of the year, following his June travel to New Delhi to meet with Indian counterpart Narendra Modi. Many people saw Dahal's first port of call as his turnaround of rhetoric against the powerful southern neighbor. Following his leadership in Nepal's 10-year Maoist uprising, which was unquestionably one of the most disruptive events of modern Nepal, Dahal has been critical of India regularly since his entrance into post-revolutionary Nepal as a severe and disruptive political actor. The uprising played a part in the nation's transformation from an absolute monarchy to a boisterous, disorderly, but thus far unwaveringly communist one. "I was keeping a straight face." To maintain his dignity, Dahal returned from the trip with several successes, including the expansion of many bilateral trade posts and facilities, the signing of a new transshipment pact that will allow Nepal to use India's waterways, and Indian involvement in several hydropower and transmission line projects. Modi spoke of taking relations between Nepal and India to Himalayan heights with his customary bombast. He boldly pledged to boost India's current use of 450 megawatts of power produced in Nepal to 10,000 megawatts within 10 years. India's consent to using its territory as a reliable transmission link for Nepal to sell electricity to Bangladesh is a trilateral advantage. A filthy, long-lasting, and public secret is concealed under this alluring South Asian sandwich: China and India's forceful, almost perceptible plays in Nepal. Nepal, like several other South Asian nations, has been forced to participate in India versus China Premier League. The fact that it can profit from this rivalry pretty well is a plus. Various Nepalese governments have occasionally looked to one nation above another for continuity. But there is a price for it. Nepal is familiar with it. Foreign policy about literally, Nepal has been both a kingmaker and a king-unmaker. Such an account began in the 1950s. The play has significantly increased in speed, complexity, and intensity over the last 20 years. Leading Indian and Chinese diplomats have been known to move back and forth between Kathmandu and other parts of the country. Less frequently, lower-level officers do this both explicitly and secretly, to forge and break political alliances and even to get involved in the constitution-writing process. And, naturally, speak poorly of one another. Occasionally, a visiting foreign minister, ranking ambassador, or visiting foreign secretary will effectively call people from Nepal's creme layer to a durbar. Every nation constantly searches for gaps in the other's Nepal playbook, which reflects their regional playbook. Consider the events of 2015, when India expressed a strong desire to enact Nepal's new constitution, purportedly to assist individuals of Indian origin living in the low-lying Madhya region to the south. Additionally, provincial elections were about to occur directly across the Indian border. Starting in September of that year, there was an economic blockade along the southern border for several months, nearly bringing Nepal to its knees. Nepal had already been devastated by a horrific earthquake in April of 2015. It presented China with a chance. Things might get heated. The activities of China's envoys in Nepal were at one point described by the country's establishment media as typical of the so-called wolf warrior diplomats of the Xi Jinping era, who play hard and don't care about fouls. Alternatively, for diplomatic niceties, as demonstrated earlier this year by China's representative in France's absurd remarks about Ukraine. In other words, India's holy cow diplomats refuse to back down in the face of China's assertive actions. India's well-marinated beef with China guarantees motivation. However, beyond the scandal of 2015, there are other peculiar, even perplexing, aspects can give China the upper hand. This is true even though India and Nepal have long had free travel policies. Nepali nationals are free to live and work in India. There are defense connections and preferential access to Nepali goods, and India is gradually giving in to Nepal's requests to use its territory for various forms of transshipment and regional connectivity. There's a persistent perception that Nepal continues to serve as a stopover for illicit activities, such as smuggling and black market items. Additionally, it's said that people from third nations suspicious of India are smuggled into India across the porous 1,850-kilometer border between India and Nepal. India formally outlawed the transportation of notes larger than 100 rupees to or from Nepal for several years. Even though Nepal no longer supports higher denomination notes because of India's destructive and almost arbitrary remonetization and demonetization. In 2016, the 500 Indian and 1000 Indian rupee denominations experienced this. Additionally, the decision has been made to remove the 2000 Indian rupee notes that were abruptly released in 2016 with great hoopla by this September. Extremely high. Indian nationals who choose to travel abroad by air must have a no-objection certificate obtained from the Indian embassy located in Kathmandu. The only exceptions are Indian nationals who visit Nepal from a third nation and then return there. Before boarding the flight, passengers traveling from Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu to India on Indian carriers must go through an additional screening process. Since there are no jetways, this takes place on an elevated platform beside the stairs, as if to ensure that, even though Nepal acceded to India's demand, the face was spared by doing an extra round of frisking a few inches above Nepali land. This last method stems from the 1999 hijacking of an Indian Airlines Airbus A300 in Kathmandu, which led to a forced rerouting of the flight IC-814 from Kathmandu to Delhi, with the final flight path being Kathmandu-Amritsar Lahore-Dubai Kandahar-Delhi. The incident was a notorious one. 3 top-tier Islamist terrorists, including Masood Azhar, the chairman of Jaish-e-Mohammed, were released from Indian jails to liberate hostages that had been held in Taliban-controlled Kandahar at the time of the hijacking, which claimed the life of an Indian passenger. It took place when the previous government, led by the BJP, was in office. Ajit Doval, India's current national security advisor, played a crucial role in the hostage discussions. At best, alleviating the curse of memory is a work in progress. At worst, it's a chance to stir up fresh anxiety, tension, and hatred. It would be prudent for China and India to keep in mind that their mutual gains are not necessarily the result of one another's errors or the generation of bad vibes in Nepal or, for that matter, other parts of the region. Similarly, while loyalty isn't typically associated with politics or international relations, Nepal's evolving political leadership would be well to remember that turning to one neighbor or another for personal security can be a ménage à trouble that could potentially affect the entire nation.